And welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, my name is Sarah and we are always doing something different on my channel. Today we are going to tackle giving this desk a makeover. You can see it's been well loved. It's gone through lots of dings and nicks and scratches. The person I got this from, it actually came with a set, and he said he's had it since he was a kid. So I think it's had a few decades of wear and tear and use, and we're going to give this a fresh look and patch all these holes and scratches. Now first we pull out all of the drawers to get ready to clean it. I did find a little dollar back there. That was a nice surprise, especially since I got this set for free, so he paid me $1 to take it away. Once we get all the drawers out and everything taken out, just gotta clean it out. So I'm gonna vacuum it out really good, and then I will go through and wipe it down really good as well. And this whole time I'm going to do the same thing with the chair. So got to get that cleaned up and ready for painting. I decided it would clean up better if I took the handles off first. So after I got the handles off, then I wiped the drawers down inside and out. My kids like to come in and help from time to time, so Alana is helping take the chair glides off of the chair. Next, I poured some stripper and spread it around with a chip brush on the desktop. I'm only stripping the desktop and the seat of the chair because I'm gonna sand them down and restain them, but the rest of the desk I decided to paint, which I hem-hauled around a lot because I think this set has been redone because the insides of the drawers are stained, and I've never seen that. Usually it's kind of bare wood. So the inside is dark, so I felt like I needed to go with a dark color of paint, which I'll show you in the future here. But for right now, I decided to strip the top and the chair seat and only stain those. While the stripper sets and breaks up the finish on the desktop and chair seat, I'm going to scuff sand the drawer fronts, the desk base, and the rest of the chair that's not the seat, all the spindles and such. I'm sanding with, I think, a 180 grit sandpaper to just take off some of the finish and get it ready for painting. So I found this interesting. On the desktop, the stripper worked perfectly. It got the top coat off just fine. You can see it's all crackled, it's worked. And it was pretty easy to scrape up, no problem at all. I did have to go back and touch up a few spots, but it came up great. But then on the chair, the stripper sat even longer, and it's like it did nothing. So I don't know if there just wasn't a top coat that needed taken off or what, but I essentially just scraped off the stripper because it did nothing almost. Once I scraped off as much stripper as I could, I came back with a pad and some TSP water to clean and neutralize the stripper to get as much gunk off as I could to get ready for sanding. Then I had to go back with regular water and also wipe down everything that I scuff sanded to get all the powder and gunk off from there so that I could be ready to paint. However, I then sanded the stain out of the top of the desk, so that was really pointless because I needed to wipe it all down again after I was done sanding. So if you're doing furniture, don't do a wipe down until you're exactly ready to paint, because you'll just be wiping it down if you're sanding, and that's just silly and a waste of time. Now for sanding the top, I started with a 180 grit sandpaper to get most of the stain out, and I was not concerned about some of the dings and nicks and stuff. It did not come out with this sanding but you wait, and when you go back with a 220 grit sanding, that is actually what takes out more of the dings and nicks. However, some can be too deep and you're just going to have to let them go or fill them. You don't want to sand forever and ever. So 180 and then 220 to get a nice smooth finish ready for staining. Now this had some interesting drawer glides. These pegs helped keep the drawers stable, and most of them you couldn't pull out, but a couple of these look like they have been glued in before. There was like a crispy clear coat on them, and so I just put more glue back on them and clamped them in to get them to not come out again. Alright, so if you saw my previous furniture flip video of doing a dresser, you saw that the wood filler that I had already had on hand said it was stainable, but it did not stain very well. So while at the hardware store, this guy who refinishes floors said that he's had really good success with this wood filler. And so I picked it up, and here I am. There was a couple of dings in the desktop that I felt were too deep. Now this is knotty pine, so it seems to be a really soft wood, and actually dings and nicks really easily, sadly. But so there were a couple of holes. I was like, I gotta fill these. So I filled them, and when I stain, I'll point out to you how well it did. Now after using that new wood filler, I did not like the graininess of it. So for the bottom here where it's pretty beat up, I'm gonna use my old wood filler because I felt like once sanded down and made smooth, it was fine for painting. Gotta have a little help from the cats and inspect the project and make sure everything's going okay. I think they've okayed my progress so far. For this really deep gouge, I'm going to have to do a couple layers of wood filler. It's in the back of the desk, so it's not going to be seen, but I can't just leave that bare. And there's a couple other scratches here that I'll just fill with wood filler and it'll be fine. For cleaning the hardware, I saw that you can use vinegar water to boil it and get the gunk off. I don't want to use strong, harsh chemicals, so I gave it a try. I don't know if I needed to do this, but I did, and then I just scrubbed it with an old scrub brush to get the gunk off and figure at least there's no more junk and gunk to clog up a nice coat of paint. I decided to paint the handles a nice soft gold, and because there's that moving handle piece, I gave it many light coats, probably like 5 or 6, because I'd have to let it dry and move the handle up, and then paint the other side, let it dry, move the handle down, so on and so forth to get a nice even coat. It turned out pretty good. Now, for choosing which stain to use, I put a lot of thought into trying to figure out what would work best. I'm painting the desk black, so I wanted a color that would complement black, but I also needed to be aware of the color tones in the wood. Now, the knots are generally kind of a red color, but then there were a lot of gray and black specks left over from the previous stain that I couldn't get out with my 2 sets of sandpaper that I used. So I decided I wanted kind of a red tone in my stain to blend the knots in, because I've used kind of a more brown color stain before and it just really made those red knots pop. So I wanted to kind of blend so that the red knots kind of blended in with the rest of the stain color. So I picked up a red mahogany, and I tried that on this first part, but I didn't like how dark it was. So I also have a second stain. So I tried the golden pecan, but that was kind of a yellowy red, and I didn't like that alone. So I went right back over it while wet, or after wiping it off, and went over the red mahogany with it, and then wiped it off right away. And that was closer to the color of red that I wanted. So I decided to do over the whole top a golden pecan coat, and then wipe it off, and then right away do a red mahogany coat over top of it, and then wipe it off. And I think I like the way it turned out. I think it'll be fine. Here is where I went wrong. Dun, dun, dun. I primed this piece because I didn't have my paint yet, and I kind of wanted to see if I wanted to go with a lighter color, so I tinted my primer with a little bit of black paint to make it kind of gray. But in the end, I wish I never did that, because it was such a pain to paint black over top of gray. I mean, it was pretty much white. But hopefully it sticks well. So everything got a coat of primer. Alright, so back to this new wood filler. I felt like it left an oil spot and did not stain super great. It did stain better than the other one. But because this is knotty pine, I realized, oh, well, I can try to make this look kind of more like a knot and make the center darker. And it kind of worked. It's not the same, but it helped. Okay, now it's time to sand the primed areas, wipe them down, and then we can put the first coat of black. My goodness, by this point, this feels like it's taking forever, and I'm pretty sure I need to buy a paint sprayer if I'm going to keep doing this. It is pretty satisfying, though, to watch it happen and see it go from primer white to a nice coat of black. Alright, fast forward a couple steps because there's no need to bore you with them. I did 2 coats of paint, sanded between the coats of paint, and now it is time for the wipe on poly. I'm going to put 1 coat of poly on. I'm going to sand it all down to get the bumps and whatever's off, and then I'm going to put a second coat, and I actually put a 3rd coat on the top of the desk and on the chair seat. Now, I don't know about you if you have done this, but it is unnerving to me to put a nice top coat of poly and then go and take 220 grit sandpaper and scratch it up. It just, oh, it's painful, but you put that next coat of poly on, well, you wipe the dust off, and then you put that next coat of poly on, and it's fine. It turns out fine, but to me, oh, it's painful because you spend so much time getting a nice coat of paint, and then you scratch it up, but it's fine. It just follow the instructions on the can, it's fine. I will mention here that on my first coat, I used a scrap of t-shirt, which was suggested to me by the person who suggested the poly to me, and I found that it left a ton of lint in my poly, and that was a big bummer. So I switched to an old sock, and I think this is working a lot better. So I do not recommend using a scrap piece of t-shirt, and I think a sock works better. You might have a better recommendation. Feel free to put that in the comments, but at least a sock is better than a t-shirt. At this point, I thought I was done, and then I looked at these little detailed design on the desk and realized you can still see primer through. So I had to get myself another little fancy paintbrush and cover those in, which means then I had to wait for it to dry, and then I needed to do my 2 coats of poly on that part. So it's okay. I just delayed it a few days, but it's fine. I got it done. I don't want to skimp and leave primer showing. That's just awful. We're in the home stretch now. It is time to put the hardware back on and then put this thing back together and stage it and show the final reveal. Woo! All right. It's looking good. It is turning out great. There are some things that I would do differently, but all in all, I think this desk looks like it got a facelift. It just looks so much better, and I can't wait for you to see the final reveal. Let's look back and remember where we started and see how far this piece has come.